In my first Big Three Bible Cults video, I explained that the Jehovah's Witnesses, the Latter-day Saints, and the Seventh-day Adventists are all Restorationist groups. But what exactly does that mean, and what are their teachings around it? Let me fill you in.
I don't mind, I'm just trying to find a little peace in my mind. Left it way behind, still on my grind. I'll just keep on hunting for the divine, yeah, for the divine.
The term Restorationist groups is one that was given to a number of independent Bible-based movements that all started in around the early 1800s in America. It was during this religious revival that a number of movements and churches sprung up and started to claim that they were the one true church, restoring the original church given by the apostles. I introduced this a little bit in my short 5-minute video, Church History Before the Second Great Awakening, so be sure to check that one out if you get a chance. In a nutshell, Restorationist groups assert that the original church was corrupted after the passing of Jesus Christ and usually his apostles. The line that they draw can change from group to group, but the long story short of it is this: the original church was corrupted and needed to be restored, and was restored by their respective leader. Now, the total number of groups that came from the Second Great Awakening and can be classified as Restorationist groups is actually quite large. Some of them are quite low in number, some of them are quite high in number, but they're all united by that same methodology, that they restored the original church because it was corrupted and apostatized. The Great Apostasy, in fact, is not just shorthand or a nickname. It is actually a core belief that they hold. They state that there was a particular time in history known as the Great Apostasy, which was when the original church was corrupted. Some believe it was slightly later, some believe it was slightly earlier, but they all believe the same thing. They all even misuse a lot of the same kinds of scriptures, like for example 1 Thessalonians 2, 2 Timothy 4, and Acts 20. They don't just proof text these scriptures, they also do so while purposefully removing all context of the original Bible writer. They'll then assert that it was a prophecy of a great apostasy to come, that they were the prophesied ones that were going to come through and clean it up, and that the rest is history. But as touched on earlier, it isn't just the act of stating the great apostasy or the original apostatizing of the church that is the end result. It's just the stepping stone. They do it so that they can remove all of the authority out from under the church and give it to themselves. Because as is the case with all good mutinies, in order to get them to vote for you, you first have to get them to overthrow the original captain. So now that we've built the foundations for a good Restorationist group, let's go through each of the big three Bible cults and show from their literature, from their publications, how they assert themselves to be the one true restored church on earth. Number one is the Seventh-day Adventists. Now off the bat, it is worth mentioning that not every Seventh-day Adventist follows the writings or teachings of Ellen G. White. In fact, the church itself is trying to distance themselves a lot from her false prophecies and her false assertions. However, she still holds the original position as being the foundational prophetess of the church, which means that her writings are still held in largely high regard. One such writing was her 1858 book, The Great Controversy, where she covers her take on the Great Apostasy and the original church corruption. In this book, she left nothing to the imagination, saying very clearly and very explicitly that the original church was completely apostatized, that it had fallen prey to pagan teachings and traditions, and that nothing was redeemable about it. She then wasted no time bringing the attention straight to her teachings and straight to the teachings of the church that she had founded. She stated that in order to be saved, you had to give up on your existing theology and accept her doctrines, her teachings, her writings. So even though many modern Seventh-day Adventists have tried really hard to separate themselves from the early writings and teachings of Ellen G. White, it's nearly impossible to do so. Unfortunately, the entire foundation of the movement was built on the Restorationist teachings of a false prophetess, and that's something that they unfortunately just can't get rid of. Next up is the Latter-day Saints. They actually switched up the script a little bit and not only asserted the original Bible writings as proof texts, but also wrote it into their new book, the Book of Mormon. Especially in the book of 1 Nephi, this is very apparent, because there are writings in there that specifically state not only that the original church was prophesied as coming through from Joseph Smith, but that there would only be two churches that exist, the Church of God and the Church of the Devil. This was then compounded on in their books of doctrine, stating that after the apostles died, the apostolic authority was lost, alongside the priesthood keys. This then resulted in the entire church that Jesus Christ founded on earth to be gone, completely lost to apostasy. That is, until Joseph Smith came on the scene and apparently restored the fullness of the gospel. So thus far we're seeing a pretty consistent playbook being followed. Original church, great apostasy, church is lost for centuries, until great prophet comes in and fixes it, restores church for everybody. Seems like a pretty consistent play. So let's see how the Jehovah's Witnesses went with it. The Jehovah's Witnesses, much like the Seventh-day Adventists, take a bit more of a biblical approach. So they refer to the apparent prophecies found in Scripture of an impending apostasy after the passing of Christ and his apostles. However, they seem to take a bit more of a historical assertion approach. So they're a lot more confident in their writings, saying, this great apostasy happened, here's the historical account, we're not really going to prove it, we're just going to refer to our own authority, but it confidently happened, trust us bro, we say so. What you'll notice about the Jehovah's Witness approach though is they focus a lot less on the death of the apostles being a source of the apostasy, and more so on the rise of the Christian nation in Rome through Constantine. Now the reason for this is it's able to simultaneously look back at the original church and say it's apostate, while focusing specifically on the rise of the Catholic Church. This puts them in a funny love-hate relationship with the original church, because they look at the original church as a model of who to follow, but really only up until the point of Constantine. After that, it becomes a model of what not to follow and of a fallen church. This is why many people will hear the line from Jehovah's Witnesses that they are restoring the worship of the original apostles, not just restoring the church of the original apostles, which makes them feel like their form of worship is immediately validated. So I'll leave it up to all of you to decide. Do you think that each of these three groups independently restored the true church on earth? Do you think that each of them restored true worship on earth? That all of them restored the true line of the apostles on earth? Or do you think maybe it was just the teachings of a prophet from each of them that popped up and tried to steal the limelight? So if you're a Jehovah's Witness or a Latter-day Saint or a Seventh-day Adventist, I plead with you, I beg of you to ask yourself, how can I truly be following the one true line of Christ, the one true church of Christ and his apostles, if I am following teachings that are completely unique, only found in history after the 1800s when my prophet made them up? I understand that you've been taught to respond to these kinds of accusations with mental firewalls or to shut them off, but I promise you, just like every other sect and cult in history, either you will leave it or it will fail you somehow. It'll fall, it'll corrupt something. But when it does, we will still be here. Christians will still be here, and Jesus will still be here. So please, when your church fails you, when your cult fails you, don't think that Christ has failed you. And as always, if you are not an ex or current cult member and you're watching this, please, if you come across these people, show them love. Show them the love of Christ so that maybe it'll cause that first bit of a crack in the armor that helps them to escape their cult. And for anyone out there saying that I say nothing good about these groups, well, the Latter-day Saints have the coolest buildings, Jehovah's Witnesses have the most metal artwork, and the Seventh-day Adventists, they do the most to fight masturbation through catalogs. God bless you all. I'll see you in the next one.